Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished plating the last order for the evening rush. The small diner on Station Kepler 442 wasn't much to look at, but it served the best food this side of the galaxy. Miners, traders, and travelers from dozens of species made regular stops just to taste what the human chef could create from simple ingredients. The bell above the door chimed, and Marcus looked up expecting another late customer. Instead, he froze. A massive figure filled the doorway, easily 8 feet tall with scales that shimmered between deep purple and midnight blue. The being's eyes glowed amber in the dim light, and when he moved, Marcus caught sight of powerful wings folded against his back. A dragon. An actual dragon. But what made Marcus's heart skip wasn't fear. It was the desperation in those ancient eyes. Behind the dragon, partially hidden in his shadow, stood a smaller figure. Another dragon, clearly female, with scales of silver and pearl. Her hand rested protectively over a swollen belly, and even from across the room, Marcus could see how thin she had become everywhere, except for the precious life she carried. The male dragon approached the counter slowly, as if afraid his very presence might cause panic. Most of the other customers had already noticed and were backing away, some reaching for weapons. Marcus raised his hand in a calming gesture toward his patrons while keeping his eyes on the dragons. "Please," the male dragon said, his voice like distant thunder. "I mean no harm. I am Zephyr of the Storm Peak clan. This is my mate, Luna." His voice cracked slightly. "She carries our first hatchling, but we have been traveling for months. Food is scarce in the Outer Rim, and what little we find." He gestured helplessly at his mate's condition. Luna swayed slightly on her feet, and Zephyr immediately moved to support her. Marcus could see the exhaustion in both of them. The male's own scales had lost their luster, and his frame seemed too thin beneath the imposing exterior. "We heard tales," Zephyr continued, "of a human chef who could work miracles with food, who could make meals that sustained beings from any world, any species. We have traveled across 3 sectors to find you." The diner had gone completely silent. Marcus was aware of every eye on him, waiting to see how the human would respond to this unprecedented request. Dragons were legendary beings, spoken of in whispers and ancient texts. Most spacers went their entire lives without seeing one, and here were 2 asking for his help. Marcus studied the pair for a long moment. He had dealt with hundreds of species during his years on the station. Crystalline beings who absorbed nutrients through their skin, methane breathers who required special atmospheric processors, even energy beings who fed on electrical currents. Each had presented their own challenges, but he had never turned away a hungry customer. "Sit," he said finally, gesturing to the largest booth in the corner. "Both of you." Zephyr's eyes widened in surprise. You will help us?" "I'm a chef," Marcus said simply. "You're hungry. That's all I need to know." He turned to address the other customers. "Show's over, folks. Finish your meals and pay your tabs." As the other patrons reluctantly returned to their food, Marcus helped Luna to the booth. Up close, he could see the delicate bone structure beneath her scales, the way her breathing seemed labored. Pregnancy was taking a severe toll on her already weakened system. "How long since you've had a proper meal?" Marcus asked, pulling out a small scanner to check their biological readings. "Proper meal?" Zephyr laughed bitterly. "We've been surviving on whatever we could hunt or forage, raw meat, bitter roots, contaminated water when we could find it. Luna requires specific nutrients for the hatchling's development, but we've been unable to—" "Stop!" Marcus said, holding up a hand. The scanner's readings made his stomach turn. Both dragons were severely malnourished, and Luna's condition was borderline critical. "Save your strength. Let me work." Marcus had faced challenging requests before, but never anything quite like this. Dragons were apex predators, But they were also incredibly complex beings with sophisticated nutritional needs. The female's pregnancy added another layer of complexity. Whatever he prepared needed to nourish both mother and developing offspring. He began pulling ingredients from his extensive pantry, his mind racing through possibilities. High-protein synthetic meat wouldn't work. Dragons needed specific amino acid chains found only in fresh kills. Standard vegetables would be useless to their carnivorous systems, but certain mineral-rich plants might provide essential nutrients. As he worked, Marcus found himself thinking about the journey these two had undertaken. 3 sectors was an incredible distance, especially for beings in their condition. They had risked everything on stories and rumors, hoping to find salvation in a small diner on a frontier station. The reputation Marcus had built wasn't just about good food. It was about understanding that nutrition meant survival for travelers in the depths of space. He had studied xenobiology not just to be a better chef, but because he genuinely cared about feeding the galaxy's diverse inhabitants. Every species that had walked through his door had taught him something new. But dragons? They were supposed to be myths. As the first course began to take shape, Marcus glanced back at his unusual customers. Luna had her head resting against Zephyr's shoulder, her breathing shallow but steady. Zephyr watched Marcus work with an intensity that spoke of desperate hope and barely controlled fear. "The stories we heard," Zephyr said quietly, "they spoke of a human who treated all beings as equals, who never turned away the hungry, regardless of species or circumstance. I confess, I did not believe such a being could exist." Marcus looked up from his preparation. "Why not?" "Humans are young compared to our kind. We have seen empires rise and fall, watched species achieve greatness only to destroy themselves. In our experience, younger races are driven by fear and self-interest. They help their own kind and view all others as potential threats." "Maybe some do," Marcus admitted, seasoning a large cut of synthesized protein with carefully selected mineral compounds. "But hunger doesn't discriminate. Fear, pain, need. These things are universal. If I can help, why wouldn't I?" The simple sincerity in Marcus's voice seemed to affect Zephyr deeply. The great dragon's eyes misted over, and he carefully stroked Luna's silver scales as she dozed fitfully against him. "You should know," Zephyr said after a moment, "helping us may bring consequences. Our kind are not universally beloved. Some see us as monsters from ancient nightmares. Others view us as valuable commodities. Our scales, our blood, our eggs are worth fortunes on the black market. By showing us kindness, you mark yourself as either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." Marcus paused in his work. "Which do you think I am?" Zephyr studied the human for a long moment. "I begin to suspect you are something else entirely." The first dish was ready, a carefully crafted soup designed to provide immediate energy while being gentle on weakened digestive systems. Marcus had infused it with nutrients specifically needed for draconic physiology, based on his rapid analysis of their biological scans. The broth was rich and dark, made from synthetic bone marrow and rare minerals, with tender pieces of protein that would dissolve easily. He brought the bowl to Luna first. She stirred as the aroma reached her, her eyes fluttering open. The change in her expression was immediate, hunger and longing replacing exhaustion. "Slowly," Marcus cautioned as she reached for the spoon with trembling claws. "Your system needs time to adjust." The first sip brought tears to Luna's eyes. She clutched Zephyr's hand as the warm nutrition began to spread through her body, and Marcus could actually see some color returning to her pale scales. "By the ancient fires," Zephyr whispered, watching his mate's transformation. "What have you created?" "Just soup," Marcus said, but he was already planning the next course. "This is only the beginning." As Luna continued to sip carefully at the revitalizing broth, Marcus returned to his kitchen with renewed purpose. He had promised to feed them, but already he was thinking beyond that. These weren't just customers. They were refugees, survivors of some greater tragedy that had forced them from their home. The least he could do was send them on their way properly nourished. What Marcus didn't realize was that word of the dragon's arrival was already spreading through the station's communication networks. Traders were sending messages to contacts in distant systems, bounty hunters were checking current prices on dragon-related materials, and station security was quietly alerting higher authorities about the unprecedented situation developing in the small diner. The trouble Zephyr had warned about was already beginning, but for now, in the warm light of Marcus's kitchen, two ancient beings experienced something they had almost forgotten: hope. The second course Marcus prepared was a carefully constructed protein blend designed to rebuild Luna's strength while providing essential nutrients for her developing hatchling. He worked with the precision of a scientist and the intuition of an artist, adjusting mineral content and amino acid ratios based on real-time feedback from his biological scanners. Luna had finished the soup and was already looking more alert. Her scales had regained some of their natural luster, and her breathing had steadied. Zephyr watched every spoonful she took with the intensity of a guardian watching over precious treasure. As Marcus plated the second dish, his communication terminal chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at the display and frowned. Station Administrator Valdez wanted to see him immediately regarding an urgent security matter. Marcus deleted the message without responding and continued his work. "You're ignoring your superiors for us," Zephyr observed, his enhanced hearing having picked up the message notification. "This confirms my suspicions about the trouble we may have brought." "Let me worry about the politics," Marcus replied, adding final touches to the plate. "Right now, your mate needs nutrition, not stress." But even as he said it, Marcus could see movement through the diner's front windows. Station security officers were taking positions around the building, trying to look casual but failing completely. A small crowd of onlookers had gathered at a safe distance, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. The main course was unlike anything Marcus had ever created. He had synthesized proteins that mimicked the nutritional profile of the ancient prey species that dragons had evolved to hunt, enhanced with modern supplements to address specific deficiencies shown in their scans. The presentation was simple but elegant. He had learned that most species preferred food that looked natural rather than overly processed. Luna's reaction to the first bite was immediate and profound. Her entire body seemed to relax for the first time since they had arrived, and she made a sound that was almost a purr. Zephyr tasted his own portion, and his eyes widened in amazement. "This is impossible," he said, looking between the food and Marcus. "How do you know our physiology so precisely? These flavors, these nutrients, it's as if you consulted our ancestral memory itself." "Good cooking is about understanding your audience," Marcus replied. But privately, he was amazed at how well the meal had turned out. He had been operating on educated guesswork and xenobiological theory, but somehow everything had come together perfectly. As the dragons ate, Marcus noticed changes beyond simple nourishment. Luna's movements became more graceful, her posture straightened, and the protective way she held her belly became less desperate and more confident. Zephyr's own transformation was equally dramatic. His scales brightened to their full glory, and the ancient power that was his birthright began to show in the way he held himself. The communication terminal chimed again, this time with multiple urgent messages. Marcus glanced at the display and saw alerts from station security, the administrator's office, and something that made his blood run cold, a priority message from the Galactic Enforcement Division. Someone had reported the dragon's presence to the highest levels of interstellar authority. "We should leave," Zephyr said, noticing Marcus's expression. "We have caused enough trouble for your kindness." "You're not going anywhere in your condition," Marcus said firmly. Luna needs rest and continued nutrition. That baby dragon needs its mother healthy. Hatchling, Luna spoke for the first time, her voice like wind chimes made of silver. We call them hatchlings, not babies. Marcus smiled. The hatchling needs its mother healthy. But even as they talked, the situation outside was escalating. More security personnel had arrived, along with what looked like specialist equipment. Marcus recognized some of the gear: containment fields, heavy stunners, even what appeared to be a portable stasis chamber. They mean to capture us, Zephyr said quietly, his voice carrying dangerous undertones. To study us, perhaps, or sell us to the highest bidder? Not while you're in my establishment, Marcus said with a conviction that surprised even him. You came here for food, not to be anyone's prisoners. The front door chimed, and 3 figures entered. Administrator Valdez, a nervous man in his 50s who had always been polite but distant with Marcus. Behind him came Captain Torres of Station Security, a professional soldier who had served in the border wars. The third figure made Marcus's heart sink: Commander Helena Cross of the Galactic Enforcement Division, notorious for her ruthless efficiency and her special interest in collecting rare species for government research programs. Mr. Chen, Valdez began, his voice shaking slightly, I'm afraid we have a situation here. These beings need to come with us for processing and documentation. They're customers, Marcus said calmly, not moving from behind his counter. Paying customers who came here for a meal. Commander Cross stepped forward, her cold eyes taking in the scene. She was tall and angular, with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, and the kind of pale blue eyes that seemed to see everything as a potential threat or resource. Mr. Chen, these are not just any customers. These are dragons, an extremely rare and valuable species. Their biological materials alone are worth millions of credits on the research market, not to mention the strategic value of studying their capabilities. They're pregnant refugees who were starving, Marcus replied, his voice gaining edge. And they're under the protection of hospitality laws. Cross laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Hospitality laws? For dragons? Mr. Chen, these beings are barely classified as sentient. They're animals, albeit very intelligent and dangerous ones. Zephyr's low growl filled the diner, and the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Luna placed a calming hand on his arm, but her own eyes had begun to glow with inner fire. Animals, Zephyr repeated, his voice carrying harmonics that made the windows rattle. Interesting perspective from a species that has existed for less than 100,000 years. You see? Cross gestured triumphantly. Hostile and unpredictable. They need to be contained for the safety of everyone on this station. Marcus looked at the dragons, seeing not monsters, but exhausted parents-to-be who had traveled across the galaxy seeking nothing more than a safe meal. He thought about all the beings he had fed over the years, all the different species who had found welcome in his small diner. He had never asked for papers or documentation, never worried about the politics of who deserved food and who didn't. No, he said simply. Commander Cross blinked. Excuse me? I said no. They finish their meal in peace. They rest if they need to. And then they leave when they're ready. That's how it works in my establishment. Mr. Chen, Captain Torres interjected, trying to be diplomatic, you're putting yourself and others at risk. These are powerful beings. If they become aggressive... The only aggression I've seen has come from you, Marcus replied. They asked politely for food. They've been nothing but grateful and peaceful. Cross's face hardened. Mr. Chen? You're interfering with official galactic enforcement business. I can have you arrested for obstruction. Then arrest me, Marcus said, crossing his arms. But they don't leave until they're ready. The standoff stretched taut as a wire. Outside, Marcus could see more personnel arriving, scientists with scanning equipment, what looked like a xenobiology team, even a small hover transport that was probably meant to carry the dragons away. Luna finished her meal and looked up at the assembled officials with ancient dignity. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of millennia. "I am Luna Starweaver, daughter of the Silver Court, mate to Zephyr Stormright of the Storm Peak clan. I carry within me the next generation of the eldest race in this galaxy. We came here in need, and this human has shown us kindness that shames your entire civilization." She stood slowly, her pregnancy evident but her bearing regal. "You speak of our value as research subjects and our danger as wild beasts. You understand nothing. We who taught the first starfaring races how to navigate between worlds, who shared the secrets of faster-than-light travel, who gave freely of our knowledge because we believed in the potential of younger species." Zephyr rose beside her, and suddenly the diner felt far too small to contain him. His presence filled the space like contained lightning, and Marcus realized for the first time just how much the dragon had been holding back. "This human," Luna continued, gesturing to Marcus, "has shown us what your species could become. Not conquerors or collectors, but beings who help simply because help is needed, who see hunger and respond with nourishment, who see fear and offer safety." Commander Cross raised her hand toward her weapon, but Captain Torres caught her wrist. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I don't think that's wise." Cross looked around the diner and seemed to realize for the first time that she was dealing with beings whose power was beyond anything in her experience. The air itself seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy, and every instinct told her that violence would end very badly for everyone. "This isn't over," she said finally. "There are protocols, procedures. You can't just disappear." "We have no intention of disappearing," Zephyr said calmly. "We are traveling to the Haven worlds in the Outer Rim, where some of our kind still maintain sanctuary. Any who wish to find us need only ask with respect rather than arrive with chains." Luna moved to Marcus and, to his surprise, bowed deeply. "We owe you a debt that cannot be repaid with mere credits. You have given us not just sustenance, but hope." "You don't owe me anything," Marcus said. "Just take care of yourselves. And that hatchling." As the dragons prepared to leave, Marcus quickly packed additional meals for their journey. High-energy foods that would keep well in space, specialized nutrients for Luna's continued health, even some treats that he hoped might bring them comfort during the long trip ahead. Commander Cross watched this exchange with obvious frustration, but she had been outmaneuvered. The dragons had identified themselves as nobility of their species, had stated their destination clearly, and had witnesses to their peaceful intentions. Attacking them now would be an act of war rather than law enforcement. As Zephyr and Luna moved toward the door, the dragon turned back to Marcus one final time. "The next time someone tells you that humans are too young, too selfish, too afraid to be trusted with the galaxy's future," he said, "remember this moment. You are proof that evolution is not just about survival, but about choosing to be better than what came before." And with that, the dragons were gone, leaving behind a diner full of stunned officials and one human chef who was about to discover just how much trouble he had indeed sparked. The aftermath of the dragon's departure hit Marcus like a cascade of falling dominoes. Within hours, his small diner became the center of a galactic incident that would reshape interspecies relations forever. Commander Cross had immediately filed reports claiming that Marcus had harbored dangerous aliens and interfered with official business. The Galactic Enforcement Division demanded his arrest, while Station Administrator Valdez tried desperately to contain the political fallout. But the story had already begun spreading through the communication networks, carried by traders, travelers, and journalists who had witnessed the extraordinary events. Marcus found himself facing charges of obstruction of justice, harboring unregistered aliens, and violating several dozen protocols he had never even heard of. His diner was officially closed pending investigation, and his assets were frozen while authorities decided what to do with the human chef who had dared to protect dragons. But something unexpected began to happen across the galaxy. The story of Luna and Zephyr's visit, and Marcus's simple act of kindness, resonated with beings from hundreds of different species. Social networks buzzed with discussions about hospitality, dignity, and the courage to do what was right regardless of consequences. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist from the prestigious Andromeda Institute, was among the first to speak out publicly. Her research had focused on dragon physiology for decades, though she had never encountered a living specimen. When she analyzed Marcus's meal recordings, her findings sent shockwaves through the scientific community. "What this human accomplished," she announced at a packed press conference, "represents the most sophisticated understanding of draconic biology ever demonstrated. The nutritional profiles he created were not just adequate. They were perfect. The precision required suggests either miraculous intuition or a level of xenobiological knowledge that rivals our most advanced research institutions." Marcus watched the news coverage from his small detention cell, bewildered by the growing media storm. He had simply fed 2 hungry customers. How had that become the subject of galactic debate? The answer came in the form of an unexpected visitor. Elder Magistrate Thornwick of the Galactic Council arrived at Station Kepler 442 personally, something that had never happened in the station's 50-year history. The magistrate was a being of immense dignity, representing one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations, and his presence indicated that the situation had attracted the highest levels of attention. "Mr. Chen," Thornwick said when they met in the station's conference room, "you have created quite a disturbance." "I just fed them," Marcus said, still struggling to understand why everyone was making such a big deal of it. Thornwick studied the human carefully. He was ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species, and he had witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. What he saw in Marcus Chen intrigued him. A complete absence of the fear and ambition that typically drove interspecies interactions. "Do you understand what dragons represent to the galactic community?" Thornwick asked. Marcus shook his head. "I know they're rare. Everyone keeps talking about how valuable they are, but they just seemed like people to me. Hungry people." "Dragons are living legends," Thornwick explained. "They are the eldest intelligent species we know of, the first to achieve interstellar travel, the teachers who guided younger races to the stars. They possess knowledge and abilities that most species can only dream of. For thousands of years, they have been withdrawing from galactic civilization, disappearing into remote regions where younger species cannot follow or disturb them." The magistrate paused, choosing his words carefully. "What you witnessed, 2 dragons seeking help from a human, has not happened in recorded history. Dragons do not ask for assistance. They do not reveal vulnerability. They certainly do not travel across the galaxy to visit the establishment of what they would consider a primitive species." "So why did they?" Marcus asked. "That," Thornwick said, "is what has every government and organization in the galaxy asking questions. Some believe it represents a fundamental shift in dragon behavior. Others think it might indicate some crisis in their hidden territories that has forced them to seek outside help." As they talked, Marcus began to understand the larger implications of what had happened. His simple act of hospitality had potentially exposed the existence of dragon refugees, suggesting problems in their traditional safe havens. It had also demonstrated that humans could be trusted with the most sensitive of interspecies encounters. The political ramifications were staggering. The Galactic Enforcement Division faced severe criticism for their heavy-handed response to what was clearly a peaceful contact situation. Commander Cross was suspended pending investigation, and her department's protocols for dealing with rare species came under intense scrutiny. Meanwhile, support for Marcus grew from unexpected quarters. Captain Torres publicly stated that the dragons had shown no aggression until threatened, and that Marcus had handled the situation with remarkable wisdom. Several prominent human politicians demanded his immediate release, while alien rights groups declared him a hero of interspecies cooperation. But the most significant development came when the dragons themselves responded to the growing controversy. The message arrived through official diplomatic channels, delivered by quantum communication directly to the Galactic Council chambers. It was signed by the Circle of Elders, the governing body of dragonkind that most governments had assumed was purely mythical. To the beings of the galactic community, the message began. We speak now to address recent events involving two of our people and a human, known as Marcus Chen. For generations, we have watched younger species with growing concern, observing cycles of conflict, exploitation, and fear that seem to define interspecies relations. We withdrew not from arrogance but from sadness, believing that wisdom and compassion were rarities in a galaxy driven by ambition and prejudice. Marcus read the message from his detention cell, hardly believing that his small act of kindness had prompted official communication from beings of legend. The human Marcus Chen has shown us that our pessimism was not entirely justified. When faced with beings who could have been seen as threats or valuable resources, he chose instead to see individuals in need. He asked for no documentation, demanded no payment beyond what any customer would offer, and required no assurance of safety or benefit to himself. He simply provided what was needed because it was needed. The message continued with formal thanks and something that made Marcus's heart race: an invitation. We extend to Marcus Chen an offer to visit our sanctuary worlds, to learn our ways as we would learn from his. We believe that true progress comes not from the acquisition of power or resources, but from the sharing of wisdom and the recognition of common dignity among all thinking beings. The invitation sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Humans had never been granted access to dragon territories. The scientific opportunities alone were staggering, not to mention the potential for technological and cultural exchange. But Marcus found himself thinking not about the honor or the opportunities, but about Luna and Zephyr. Were they safe? Had Luna's pregnancy progressed well? Was the hatchling healthy? His concerns were answered when a second message arrived, this one personal and brief. Marcus Chen, friend and healer, Luna Starweaver has given birth to a healthy hatchling. We have named her Hope, in honor of what you gave us in our darkest hour. She will grow knowing that kindness exists in the galaxy, and that it comes from the most unexpected sources. Your debt is repaid simply by being who you are. The message was signed with symbols that glowed briefly before fading, and Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. All the political implications, all the galactic consequences, none of that mattered compared to knowing that baby Hope was safe and healthy. The charges against Marcus were quietly dropped as public opinion and political pressure made his continued detention impossible. His diner was reopened with great ceremony, and he found himself arguably the most famous chef in the galaxy. Beings traveled from across known space just to eat at the establishment where dragons had found sanctuary. But Marcus insisted on keeping things simple. He still served anyone who was hungry, regardless of species or circumstance. He still focused on understanding the needs of his customers rather than their politics or economics. The only change was a small plaque near the door that read, "All beings welcome. No questions asked." Years later, when historians studied the period they would call the Great Awakening of interspecies cooperation, they would trace its beginning to a small diner on station Kepler 442. They would write extensively about the Dragon Reformation movement, the establishment of cross-species exchange programs, and the gradual emergence of a truly integrated galactic civilization. But Marcus Chen would always remember it more simply, as the day he made soup for 2 hungry customers and accidentally proved that the galaxy was a little kinder than anyone had dared to hope. The invitation to visit the Dragon Sanctuary worlds remained open. But Marcus never felt the need to accept it. He had everything he needed right where he was: a kitchen, hungry customers, and the daily opportunity to choose kindness over fear. Sometimes, he reflected, the most profound changes in the universe began with the simplest choices. And sometimes, late at night when the diner was quiet, he would look up at the stars and wonder about a little dragon named Hope, growing up in a galaxy where her parents' story had helped prove that different species could trust each other after all.